Today we're talking about the top 5 scripts you must master to get in the elite category of a 1% wholesaler. I've taken the 21-year journey to get there, and today I am going to sum it up and teach you the 5 scripts you need to identify to absolutely master. And then I'm going to teach you step by step on how to attack these scripts and the most important parts of it. So if I was in 2024 today, starting out, I'm telling you cold calling would be the first one I would attack. And what you've got to understand about cold calling, talking about cold calling scripts, is you just have to have a certain attitude when you do it. Now, most of the time in cold calling, your people are thinking about, I've got to qualify people. I've got to qualify people. I've got to qualify people. The reality is most of the people you contact are not going to be great candidates because you just have a list and you have a prospect list and you try to intelligently gather where you think you're going to get the most traction. Maybe it's high equity, absentee owners. Maybe they're just vacant properties, whatever it is. But inevitably, you're going to come across more people that don't want to sell it to you than do want to sell it to you. So if you understand the fundamentals of cold calling, the first thing you have to master is actually you have to learn how to disqualify first. That's right. I said you have to learn how to disqualify people because most likely 8 or 9 out of 10 people you deal with will have absolutely no interest in even talking to you. And if you know that up front, you know that's the biggest battle you have to take down first. So the first thing you have to master on your cold calling scripts is how to disqualify people. And honestly, to find out if they're the owner of the property, if they have interest in selling the property. And I don't go any deeper in those questions because if you don't figure those 2 out, the rest of the questions are just literally a waste of your time. So if you understand that, you understand the need to learn how to disqualify people first. In fact, the danger point is this. Sometimes you sit in the disqualification zone so often and deep when you get someone who's highly qualified, like a motivated seller, you forget to turn off, okay, I got past the disqualifying, I pulled them out of this, now I have to qualify them. So we have to learn how to master and identify qualified candidates in the cold calling script, but you have to do the disqualifying first. And there's a part where you've got to be somewhat numb, you got to get through it, and you got to be as efficient as possible because the last thing I want to do is sit there and talk to people that have absolutely zero motivation. So the art of cold calling scripts, number 1, is learning how to disqualify. Hey, are you the owner of this property at 123 USA Street? Great. Are you looking to sell the property? Period. If I get like, yes, I'm the owner, I have absolutely no interest in selling, I just have to move on because there's nothing you can say to make them sell your house, especially at a discounted price. So we have to understand that. Now, once we go into the qualifying, which I'm going to go into another script when we do that, so that'll be the second part of this, we have to understand we actually now, after we've pulled them out of disqualify, they are a qualified, motivated seller. Now we have to churn our cold calling, which the reason I put cold, I call it warm calling now, is you have to bring it into the art of a conversation. You have to convert a cold call to a conversation. Because let's face it, the first minute of a cold call, they are wildly awkward. And that is the disqualification stage. And although you assume most of the people are not going to be interested in what you're doing, you have to pay attention for the ones that actually want to take a step forward and talk to you about selling their property. So we can never forget, even though we're cold calling people, you have to have the ability, once they qualify, to convert them to a conversation. Once you have a conversation, amazing things can happen. Remember, people will never believe you until you can have a conversation with them. How do you have a conversation? Think about how you have conversations with your family, your friends, your loved ones, everybody you deal with. It's a conversation. It's not an interview. It's not a drilling. And I'm going to be honest with you, most cold calling scripts are so cold. They're so icy. You might as well have AI make the phone call because it would be warmer than some of you guys. You guys are like robots. So how do I get out of that robotic stage? Number 1, be a human being. And when they become qualified, convert them to a conversation. How do you do that? Actually have a conversation with them. You don't have to be so scripted and so stuck. You can still ask particulars about the house and their situation, but for God's sake, stop being a robot. And you know how you do that? Robots don't smile. They just don't. Show me a robot that smiles. I doubt they do. I'm sure they can do it on command. but you got to be smiling and dialing when you're cold calling, meaning you actually have to have fun, and nobody wants to have a conversation with a Debbie Downer. So nobody wants to talk to a Karen that's going to complain. You have got to bring the fire to it. So put a little note on front of your computer, definitely in front of your phone, and it's just smile and dial. Why? Because people just know when you're smiling. End of story. They just know if you're a good-spirited person and you are bringing positive vibes to the conversation. And if you're so negative and you have nothing to smile about, people are going to feel that through the phone, and you only have yourself to blame. So I want you to understand, whenever you're doing cold calling, smile and dial has been around for over 60 years. I didn't invent it, trust me, and it goes on in every industry. You actually have to have energy to do this. So some suggestions you're doing cold calling. Don't sit in a rigid chair the entire time. Have fun, walk around, use your legs, smile, look out the windows. Sometimes you go outside and do cold calls. I don't care, whatever you need to do, but just change it up. Don't be that robotic person reading from that script. It will never convert to a conversation, I promise you. And the last thing you have to do when you do cold calling, which I give you guys huge props that do this, ready? You got to be fearless. You don't care what people think about you. I don't care if you hang up on me. I don't care if you call me a foul name. Just whatever you do, answer your phone. Because if you're fearless, the worst they can do is chew you out or hang up on you. And if you can get past that and understand that is your worst outcome, the anxiety and everything removes away from cold calling. And that's what you gotta understand. So when I'm developing a cold calling script, part of my mantra is not only am I gonna smile and dial, I'm gonna be fearless. So if I gotta get through 100 or 300 phone calls, you can't be worried about the outcome of the call. So me and Zach teach you the art of detachment. So if I'm gonna teach you the art of detachment, you have to understand you have to be fearless in cold calling. If you wanna penetrate hundreds of people in a short amount of time, you cannot worry about the outcome of what they think about you. And the problem is that's a society problem, is you guys are so worried about what people think about you, you let it control every aspect of your life. So when you go out to cold calling, you are going to do the opposite what everyone has taught you your entire life. You're going to smile and dial, and you're going to convert to conversations, and you have to be absolutely fearless in your endeavor to do cold calling, because it's not if, it's when you get chewed out and when you get hung up. And if you know that's the worst they can do to you, what do you care? And I want you to understand that. So don't worry about that. So the first one, as we said on that, we're talking about here is basically our cold calling scripts. And that's where most of you start out. Now, the next part of it is going to be number 2, which is going to be your qualifying scripts. And what do I mean by your qualifying scripts? This is the script you use. Now, this isn't necessarily cold calling, but a script you use to identify if you're working with a motivated seller. And as I've always told you in wholesaling, if you are not working with a motivated seller, you are in the wrong space, meaning you cannot convince people to sell you a house. Either they need to sell the house and you walk them down your funnel, your process, and what you need to do. But you're never going to make them. So when we come to qualifying scripts, you have to keep it simple, stupid. That's the kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. Do not overcomplicate this. I want to get to the point as fast as possible while building an amazing amount of rapport. And so how do I do this method? It's actually really simple. The simpler you make it. So me and Zach like to develop a simple process. And I said, this is not a sales process, because you're just walking people down kind of like a yellow brick road. And if you keep them on the road and you're helping them progress, you most likely will get the sale on the house. But if you don't help them out and you don't bring them back in when they get out of boundaries, there's nothing you can do. So we're constantly in wholesaling, like trying to put people back on the path. Now, you're never going to pull them down the path. That's what realtors mostly do. We don't do that. But you do have to guide them. You have to keep them focused. They have a lot of issues. They've got full voicemail boxes. They have major ADHD. You know what I'm talking about. They get distracted easily, and fear and anxiety takes over their life. These are what most motivated sellers we deal with. So our job is to educate them, keep them guided, and give them the best options while creating the best rapport humanly possible, because that's going to lead to an amazing conversation, which is going to develop trust, and trust is going to develop confidence in them, presenting them a cash offer for a discounted price. That's all we're going to do. So think about guiding them. Think about guiding them down this road. So if we're going to keep it simple, let's just use the acronym MCTP. I can't make it any simpler. You don't even have to write this down. You can memorize it. I know you can pronounce the MCTP, but that's motivation, condition, timeline, and price. I'm using each one of these to walk them down to verify and pull out their pain as why they are a motivated seller. And honestly, if I cannot answer the question in these 4 acronyms, motivation, condition, timeline, and price, I got to ask myself, what am I doing with this seller? So motivation is, we don't say motivation. That is an internal word we use. Mr. Seller, why are you looking to sell your house? Zip. Let them talk. This is where silence actually makes you a ton of money in wholesaling. Let them tell you their story. Now, here's a little trick I've learned. When they go negative on the house, I got bad renters, it's got deferred maintenance, I got a probate, I need to figure out how to sell, then we're fine. Let them keep going down that. But when they turn around and go, listen, the house is perfect, and they're going on and on about the white picket fence, I'm not going to sit there for 10 minutes and listen to the perfect house. The reality is 9 times out of 10, when they're calling you back as a wholesaler or they're answering your cold call and they're hearing you out, they usually have a reason they need to sell the house. Now, they're never going to tell you that right up front because you're a stranger. But once they start painting the perfect picture of the house is painted, it's got a new AC, it's got a brand new white picket fence, it is the perfect house, Rick. I simply go like this. Then why are you looking to sell it? I want to find out and verify if they're qualified to be a motivated seller. Why? Because it's important. The reason why you want to verify it is because you are a motivated seller and they are a motivated seller, and you have to have motivated sellers, because without a motivated seller, you are stuck. So my screen is stuck. So the purpose of having a motivated seller is I don't want to waste my time with them. So that's why we want to use the MCTP, and we want to make sure we go through it. So the first one is motivation. I never say it. The second one is condition. Obviously, hopefully they've told you it by this time and you're good to go. Okay, I got my screen straightened out. We're good. Now, my third one, which is my absolute favorite, is timeline. And to me, timeline is the differential maker when you're qualifying a prospect. Why? Let me tell you, because it's simple. And 9 times out of 10, they don't even see the question coming. You see, if I can ask you a question that I already kind of know the answer to, I'm way ahead of you. So if I have a seller who hasn't quite given me the motivation, they're very iffy on the condition, which is strange, timeline will be the one that I can put this entire math problem together. And it's simply like this, Mr. Seller, if I were able to buy your house today, where would you be relocating? And I just shut my mouth. And 1 or 2 ways are going to go down. Number 1, they're going to go, well, I haven't really thought about it. I don't really have a plan. So I don't know where I'm going to go, and I don't know when I'd actually be able to do it. Bottom line, you don't have a motivated seller. Now, if they answer like this, yes, I need to sell by the end of this month, and I'm moving in with my mother in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I know I have motivation there, and I'm going to try to line it up with the M, with the C, and then the T. And then when it comes to price, I don't ask them what price they need. We don't do anything like that. What do you need to get out of this to get it sold? Simple, low-level words that activates their subconscious mind, period. End of story. Sometimes they say, what do you mean? They're like, what do you need to get to move on? I don't ask the words ask, offer, what's your sales price, anything like that, because I have to go for a deep discount. And this is why we want to use out the qualification process. So remember, we're keeping it super simple. How do I do that? MCTP. It's really that simple. Motivation, condition, timeline, and price. All 4 of those questions will add up to a math problem. And basically, if you don't have alignment in at least 2 out of those 4, the odds of you having a motivated seller are slim to none. You need to put them in your follow-up, or you need to lose them and move on to another motivated seller. Now, sometimes we have a motivated seller, and that is the greatest sign you're in the right wholesale deal. Now, sometimes we have what we call a motivated property and a crazy seller, and those are typical because they're difficult. What are signs of them? When I checked the condition of the house, it was horrid. It was terrible. And condition is a big qualifier. The rougher the house, usually the more they need to sell to a wholesaler like you and me. But they told me the house is in terrible condition, but they want above market retail price on it. And that just means you have a motivated property and not a motivated seller. And that just means they need time to follow up. The market is going to correct them on their own because the market is not going to tolerate a property like that for tippy top dollar. So those are the type of people you need to just put in a follow-up sequence. Now, if I have a motivated property and a motivated seller, it is a home run. Just go with it. It's often rare to have them both line up at the same time. Now, I have a lot of motivated properties in my pipeline. Those are extremely common, and I keep a careful eye on those. They just take time. The only thing that fixes a motivated property with a crazy seller is time and circumstance. And time and circumstance, the only way you can solve those is with a thorough follow-up with your own CRM. Now, the whole point of this system is to do what? It's really to draw out their motivation and find out the pain points. Because remember, we are not going to get a good wholesale deal, which wholesaling is the art of buying deeply discounted properties and selling the contract to a cash buyer. You can't buy just average, slightly below retail like MLS. That's a waste of time. That's nothing you want to do. So let's move on to like the heart and soul of wholesaling. You ready for this? Your objection script. That's right, objections. Most of you have to understand as a wholesaler, if you're just starting out, you're figuring out all the objections. Well, I'm going to summarize this for you and help you out on this video right here today and tell you there's basically 6 common objections you're going to get in wholesaling. And the sooner you learn how to master them, the better you'll become as a wholesaler. In fact, this is where time and preparation will yield you the highest results. Now, some of you are just going to practice on your sellers, and you can do that, but it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you a lot of money because you're going to screw up perfectly good deals that if you just prepared an answer for, you would have been just fine. But you have to practice. Think about if you ever played baseball, soccer, football, basketball, any organized type of sports, they all have one element. You have to practice, rehearse over and over. Why would wholesaling be any different? So if I know there's 6 common objections in wholesaling, if I can prepare my response, I can further move along the conversation, move my prospect down the funnel to get a yes or no decision at the end. You see? But if you don't know how to respond to these objections, you feel like an idiot. And it is a terrible feeling. God knows I've been there. And in the beginning, you're going to have some times like that. Now, one of the best ways if you want to practice is just take Zillow FSBO leads and just practice on those. Because they have a low probability, you have a high rate of rejection. And if you don't believe me about the 6 objections, you'll find them out within about 300 phone calls. You will find out they all qualify. Once I understand and I identify what class an objection falls in, it's really simple to spit out a response. But here's the reality. Most of you go, gee, I don't know. Oh my God. Or you start looking up and down. You can't. This is where preparation rules. If you can prepare your comments to the objections, number 1, your confidence goes through the roof. Number 2, your sellers come much more confident in your ability to handle it. There's nothing worse. Let me ask you, if somebody's working on your car and they open the engine hood, they go, I don't know, man, it looks like your alternator, and I don't know what to do with your alternator. I'm going to take a stab at it, but I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to charge you. That's the same vibe, that same feeling you give off to them when they ask you a question, you go, I don't know. Now, it's okay not to know an answer, but these 6 objections I'm about to share with you, if you understand them, you can easily navigate through any wholesaling negotiation, transaction, whatever you need to do. So before I get into it, in my 21 years, I learned a little technique that helps me out phenomenally to handle any objections. And basically what we call it is framing. And I know they use that in the sales, but we can use it here in wholesaling. Framing is just positioning to get to a place at the end of the conversation. But to do that, we need to have agreements up front. And so it would be like if you went out dating, the idea is you set up the expectations and not rules, but the expectations up front so you can decide if you want to move on to the next date or not. Wholesaling is no different. We call it basically the upfront agreement. And the upfront agreement simply works just like this. Mr. Seller, we're going to take some time together, probably about 40, 45 minutes, and we're going to get to know each other well. In fact, I really want to learn a lot about you, and I want to learn about the house. And at the end of our conversation, you're going to have a choice to make. You're going to say, listen, I love working with Rick, and I want to work with him. And my answer is yes, I want to move forward and get the paperwork rolling. Or you decide, Rick, you're just not a good fit. It is a hard no, and we part as friends. Either way, I'm going to help you sell the house. But can we have an agreement to make that yes or no decision at the end of our conversation today? Shut your mouth. I don't care if you have to sit there for 5 minutes. Get a nod and a yes. You have to get both. A sideways or like that. Is that a yes or no? Just be very clear. That upfront agreement will be an anchor that you can use at the end of your conversation when particular objections come up. And I'll show you why it's so effective. The main reason why upfront agreements work so well is because you laid out clear groundwork on what the expectation is. Call it rules, call it guidelines, whatever you want. But when you do it, they can't come back and blame you at the end like you didn't give me enough information. In fact, you're going to use that exact leverage against them. Here's the thing is when people make verbal agreements with you one-on-one and they confirm a hard yes and a head bob, they can't really get out of it. Like nobody likes to break their word. I know people do it, but nobody likes to do it. And when you just had a fresh conversation, you can use it as an anchor point to facilitate to get through any objections you have. So let me give you a couple examples on this. So the first objection is obviously going to be price. And I'm never worried about price because price in the beginning is not an objection. Because at the end, you get to price, and that's the negotiations. I'm talking about price when people get really pushy with you. Hey, Rick, what's your offer? What's your offer? What's your price? And basically, this type of objection is someone's trying to run you over. They want you to be transactional. They don't want a conversation with you. And if you engage this person and you follow their protocol, you're going to get killed. So when you get a pushy person says, just give me your offer, I don't want to hear anything else. Just, hey, listen, John, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but let me ask you this. Have you ever bought a car you haven't test driven? Well, no, I'd never do anything like that. Well, how can you ask me to do the same thing to basically buy the biggest asset you've ever bought and ask you absolutely no questions about it? With your permission, if I can just ask you a few questions, I can try to figure out how I can get you the highest offer possible. Is it okay if I ask you those questions? That's it. I'm basically resetting the conversation saying, I am not going to be an orders McDonald taker because AI can replace those employees, and they will. You actually have to be the human that directs and consults the conversation. Because once you jump the price immediately, that means they don't want to hear your pitch. They don't want to hear your conversation, and they're scared you're going to try to befriend them to get a good price. And that is the truth. That's what you're going to do. That's what we do. So if you bypass that process, you're nothing more than a transactional person. You might as well just go get your realtor's license and call it a day. Because if you don't take control there, they're just going to start yanking you all around. So after that, they're going to tell you, how quick can you close? How much money do you have? Can't you pay more? Why does it take so long? Who's this company? Why is it assignable? And you're just going to be all over the board, and you're going to have no control, and they're going to run you over. You're going to have no respect, and they have absolutely zero confidence in you. So if you're going to let someone bully you, and it always starts with price off the bat, and you don't take control, you're better off to break that relationship on than to move forward. Because if you move forward and comply with every demand they have, go work at McDonald's, because you're asking, do you want a number 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4? Because it has nothing to do with me. It just has to do with the product and the price. And remember, you're never going to win just on price alone. We're actually trying to get you the lowest price possible. So that's usually how you deal with it. When people get very upfront with me in the beginning, I used to let them drag me all over the board. I've learned you have to hold back. There's no intrigue by giving them the price right off the bat. And honestly, the only way you can cater a custom offer is you have to get as much information, extract as much information as possible from the seller to give them the correct offer. Very rarely can you do it in one stroke. So the next one, the third party, probably my most common objection. And here's the reality of the third party is, this is when they start saying, well, I got to run it by my realtor friend. I got to run it by my lawyer. I got to run it by my sister, anything like that. And when you do that, I want you to understand the lawyer's the easiest one. Because listen, I have no problem running it by a lawyer. What's your lawyer's name? Give me their name, phone number, and email, and I'll go ahead and send them over the information. 9 times out of 10, the lawyer doesn't exist. It's just a stall method. And we're going to talk about the stall method on that. But when it comes to the third party, I want you to understand, identify the main reason why they called you. You said you wanted to sell the property quickly without going through thorough inspections and financing contingencies. And now you're talking that you want to run this by your friend, the realtor. I'm confused. I'm always going to bring them back to the point of why they called me. Now, when I want a third party endorsement and they're going to give it to a lawyer, I have no problem as long as I get the lawyer's information, which most of the time you won't get because it's a stall tactic. And basically, number two, as long as we're good at the $200,000 price and close within the 30 days, if you anchor those two things and the lawyer can do whatever they want with like some of the little paperwork in the contract, I don't care. The last thing I want the lawyer is telling the client on what they need to sell their house for, because that's not the lawyer's specialty. In fact, the lawyer will admit that they are experts in contract law and studying the law. They are terrible at negotiating any type of real estate contracts. That's why they're not realtors. So that moves on to the next one on the stall tactic. Oh my God. This is a big one. This is where we go back to our original agreement up front. So when they go through at the end like that, go, I don't know, Rick. I got to think about it. I'm not sure. I got a lot to kind of like chew on here. So I'll get back to you in like, I don't know, a couple days or a week or two. You have a choice. Either you accept that answer and get run over like the dog you are, or you anchor them on your upfront agreement. I said, John, listen, remember when we first met about 45 minutes ago and you agreed to give me a decision of a yes or no? What am I missing? They go, oh my God, that's right. I did tell you. At this point, you just have to identify them why they are uncomfortable. That's all you do. They're missing something and they're not comfortable. So I'm going to go back to my upfront agreement. And once I get the upfront agreement and I rehash it with them, they go, yeah, I did. They go, what is it that's concerning you the most? If you just had to narrow it down to one word, what would it be? It could be trust. It could be price. It could be time, anything. And then that at least gives you more information. So you get another piece of the puzzle. So you can now go back and readjust your offer to give them more confidence to do the deal with you. But the stall tactic without an upfront agreement, it's going to be used probably 80% of the time on you because human nature is to stall. Why? It gives them options. And the question is, if you let them stall you, you are nothing more than the backup option. You are the backup prom date, and that's the last thing you want to be in this business. So if you want to get rid of the stall tactic, you have to do the upfront agreement. In fact, once I learned how to do the upfront agreement, I taught everybody in my company. Our stall tactic, our objection went way down to the point it was minuscule. And remember, you can't overcome the stall tactic unless you do an upfront agreement because they didn't know the rules of engagement when you did it and they cannot do it. So that's the stall tactic. Now, a lot of you get hung up on this one, on a proof of funds. And the only time the proof of funds becomes an issue is when you make it an issue. And I'm going to give you a couple little tips on how to get past the proof of funds. Number one, if you hesitate on this part, you're dead because you don't project confidence. And remember, when they're trying to size you up to see if you're the buyer of the house, they want to know if you have the ability. Now, let's face it, some of you don't have the ability, and I know that. I was in your exact same position, but you have to go in with the confidence. So number one, make sure you fortify your purchase plan for wholesaling. If you want to learn more how to do it, go over to freewholesaling.com. I teach you how to create your own credit to actually, some of you qualify just fine to even buy a house, and you can talk the walk because you could go get a bank loan and qualify. Not everyone, but it's fine. Number two, some of you just go out and get a cash partner. A cash partner is someone that if you were called to the table, you could actually move forward and fund a deal. Remember, intention is everything in wholesaling. You have to have if you have the ability to actually take down a deal, your confidence goes through the roof. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way. It just gives you options to do it because there are certain types of wholesale deals that actually have to be taken down. You might as well be prepared for it. So a cash partner is amazing. You can give up a percentage of the deal. And if you find great deals, why wouldn't someone want to put money into you? The next one is basically what we call a hard money or a soft money lender. These are people that would lend you monies or at least give you the written the written proof that you can fund something. And the final one is if you work on a great cash buyers list, a robust cash buyers list, you can use your cash buyers proof of funds as your own proof of funds, because those are basically your business partners on it. Now, if you don't prepare through this process and they ask you about a proof of funds and you don't have a logical explanation, you are going to get run over. Now, most of the deals, you guys are leaving between $100 and $500. Get over it. This is how the business works. The money's going in escrow. The money is not at risk. If you can't set aside $500 in a few months, then you're not willing to make the sacrifice you need in wholesaling. So if the money's going into escrow, it's never at risk. I always focus on the purchase price on the property and getting the property cashed out. If you make the deposit a big deal and you keep talking about it, it's going to get worse, not better. So they go, Rick, why would you only leave $500? I go, Mr. Seller, that's a great question. You know what? I don't focus a lot on the deposit because what I want to do is take the cash and be able to buy your house and get it closed out by the end of this month. Let's focus on getting the property done. I just have to open up some money in escrow so they can pull the title, pull the paperwork to get everything ready so we can proceed with the sale. Is that okay with you? That's it. A simple explanation 9 times out of 10 is fine. In fact, my first year, I left very few deposits. The argument about a deposit, if it's legal and all this stuff, it's all in your head because I've done hundreds and hundreds of deals with never even leaving a deposit. So 9 times out of 10, the deposit argument's in your head. And here's the reality. Say somebody was selling you a house 40, 50 cents on the dollar, but they said you had to leave a $10,000 deposit. Would you walk from that deal? I wouldn't. It's just the deposit goes in the escrow. It's not the end price. So go get a partner that will fund it. But honestly, I'd be really excited because that is a slam dunk deal. And I'd have it closed in 7 to 10 days. That way I can get all the money back, get everyone squared away. And really within 2 weeks, you're going to make a ton of money, $50,000. But some of you get so short-sighted and you get so stuck on the deposit, you screw deals up with it. In fact, go over to sellmypaper.com. If you have an amazing deal and you just need help with the deposit, I'm fine with it. But it better be really good. Not like this 10, 15% discount stuff. 40, 50% discounts, 60% I've seen. Just get the deposit, guys. I've put up a 50% deposit to get a great deal. Why? Sometimes the deposit makes the seller just feel that much better, and you need to understand that going into that. Now, let's move on to objection number 5. Rick, I have another offer or a listing. Let's talk about both of them. I have another offer. Think about this. Why would the seller tell you they have another offer and still be talking to you? It's either one of two things. One, they're just price gouging, price sensitive, and they'll only take the highest price. And honestly, you're never going to get that deal anyway, so don't spend a lot of time and energy on it. Or number 2, think about this. The offer was never put in writing. It was never signed. And the wholesaler or the other real estate investor never followed through on it. It's not an offer. And 9 times out of 10, I just say it like this. Why don't you just go ahead and take that offer? Shut your mouth because I'm looking for feedback of why they don't want to do business with that person. He, she, whoever it is. And 9 times out of 10, I want you to understand this. We are never the highest offer. I say this, guys. I literally say this. I'm not going to be your highest offer, but I will be your best offer, meaning I'm going to do everything you ask me to do. I'm going to do it fair, professionally, and I'm going to do exactly what we agreed upon. And you're going to get your property sold so you can get out of here by the end of the month to go live with your mother in Fayetteville, North Carolina. That's simple. Now, a lot of times the highest offer are the ones with the most games. That's how MLS is played. And most of these people don't want to deal with it. Now, when someone goes, I have somebody who wants to list a property, that's great. I'm going to go back to the original reason why the seller contacted me. I thought you said you didn't want to list the property. You said you didn't want to have financing contingency, you don't want to have a thorough inspection, and you don't trust realtors. Am I missing something or something changed? Do you want to go that route? Because I can help you do that. In fact, guys, the more you attack the white elephant in the room, the better you'll do in this business. Because the reality is the more you try to avoid the tough questions, the tough conversations, the more they're going to bubble up and fester. So just throw them out there. If you know they're talking to someone else about an offer, ask them why they haven't taken it. I tell them right up front, go ahead and take the offer. You have to have the art of detachment in this business or you're not going to make it. Now, this is an absolutely big one. Number 6, the authority. Some of you newer wholesalers go through your entire pitch and everything and find out that you don't have the right decision maker there. So you have to make sure when you're doing your qualifying process that you have all the decision makers at the table for you ready to go. What does that mean? If there's a husband and wife, I would get them both at the table because if you pitch at the one and not the other one, that might not be the decision maker. And then they're going to take their highlight reel of whatever you said, the wholesaler, and they're going to present it to their spouse. And here's how it usually goes. Hey, Rick made an offer. It's $100,000. And I don't think it was that great of an offer. What do you want to do? That's it. That's your highlight reel because you didn't get the decision makers. Or worse, you just spent an hour and a half, whatever it was, making a presentation. And now they're going to go to the stall tactic because you didn't verify in your upfront agreement that you had the right parties involved. And when that happens, you're stuck. And you get in this perpetual, like, a week goes by, I got to call them back. So make sure you have the right people to make a decision. How do I know that? Pull up on the property appraiser's records and see who is on the deed. That's usually the person who is in charge of making that decision. Sometimes you have to bring in other family members. If you have a spouse there, ask for the other person to show up. Unless they tell you otherwise, John says I have the ability to make whatever decision I make. He trusts me. Basically, you identify that person as the person wearing the pants in the family, then do it. But you're better off having them both there. It saves a lot of conversation and it has you avoid the stall tactic, which honestly, the stall tactic is the biggest thing you have to understand when it comes to objections. So guys, listen, when it comes to your objection scripts, to counteract the 6 common objections you have to do an upfront agreement. And honestly, at the end of the day, I'm telling you, all 6 of these I just rolled out to you are going to be the most common objections you get. And if you know how to first identify them, classify them, and learn how to respond to them in a positive manner that gets your prospect back on track, going down that golden yellow brick road to make a yes or no decision to sell you the property at a discounted price. As a wholesaler, that is your job. The problem is if you act like it's the first time you heard the objection and you're fishing for an answer and you're stalling and you're ums and uns and buts and you're like all over the place, you don't exude confidence. You don't make your sellers feel very confident in you. And that's when they start talking to other people. So the best thing you can do is start practicing to overcome this stuff. It is brutally, brutally important. So, let's see here. Okay, I'm looking at your questions. We're almost done here. Let's talk about, okay, we're on script number 4. We did a lot of these. Your closing scripts. This is what weeds you out that really makes you that ultimate wholesaler. Let me explain how this works. Closing scripts is just a process. So I want you to understand this. When you get a no from a qualified, motivated seller, it just means they need more information to proceed. That's it. So if you've already qualified them, the house is motivated, maybe they're motivated, and you got a no on your first shot over the bow, it just means you did not convince them enough that you were the right person to buy the house from them. And it doesn't mean quit. It means just gather more and more information. That's all. You just got to gather more and more information. How do I gather more information? Real simple. So there's a technique, and this is not specialized to wholesaling, but in any type of industry, we call them trial closings. And basically, you're attempting to making a close, but if it goes south on you, you can do it in a perpetual loop. And it's seamless. And it can go on for a long time, and sometimes it's very short. Now, how you use those is there's trial closings techniques in wholesaling. And I've taught you guys all this before. If you go over to freewholesaling.com, me and my son teach it in deep detail. And a lot of these techniques are designed for the beginner starting out in wholesaling, so you can get through that awkward phase. Because here's what happens is most of you get to the negotiations part of wholesaling, and it's where most of you freak out. And it's where most of you actually go for a yes. You don't use the go for no, which I'm not really talking about today, but that is part of our trainings and teaching in more depth at freewholesaling.com. You're so busy trying to get out of there so you don't get rejected and you want to get a yes, you're going to make a ridiculous offer and you're just going to spin your wheels at the end of the day. So first thing you do, trial closings. How do I get past that weird, uncomfortable, awkward, like belly feeling where like the butterflies are fluttering around me? Real easy. You're not there by yourself. Just pretend Zach and Rick are right there with you. How do you do it? First one, technique. Trial closing. Good cop, bad cop. You can make an offer and there's a good cop and bad cop. So always make me the bad cop. That's what Zach does. And go, listen, hey, John, I really like the house. I understand what's going on here. But my partner, Rick, says, we only have $122,000 to make the offer. Like, I'm sorry, that's the best we can do. And that's where, like, he freaks out. He goes, are you crazy? That's nuts. The reason you do this because it takes the stress off you being the bad guy, and you get to blame somebody else. Now, you can make a phone call outside the property, whatever you need to do, and you are diffusing the situation. So the idea is they don't take your anger out on you. Now, what you'll do is decipher that information because you know good and well you have the ability to make the decision. And then here's what I say, when it starts to go south, hey, John, listen, I get it. And I'm telling you, Rick's a little bit nuts, but that's why I'm here. I'm in your corner. We got to find a number that's going to make sense so we can get this deal done. I know you need to get this house sold. Trust me, I know. I might be able to push Rick up a little bit, but what's the number you and your wife need to get this house sold? Do you see? I just took the stress off of it, gave you a tool, fired out that negative energy, brought it back, and redirected, and went right back at my trial close. You say, listen, the least we could do is like 131. And then you can do the haggle back and forth. And remember, you're the good person there representing them. And basically, you're trying to get the deal done. Now, the next one is just going to be the volley method, which I love this one because it's the ability to ask somebody a question and gives them permission to give an answer if it's positive or negative. So this works really well when you get people that are just stonewalling you. Now, a lot of times we ask them, hey, Mr. Seller, what do you need to get for this house? And they go, what do you mean? I go, bottom line, what's the number you and your wife need to move on? I don't know, Rick. You're the expert. That's why you're here. This is where you're in a trial close and you have a couple options, but you have to keep the conversation moving along. If you sit there and ums, buts, stalls, and like make phone calls, you lose all confidence and the seller is going to wane on working with you. So here's simply what I want to do. I want to use the volley method. Number one, it'll buy you time. And number two, it pushes people. Most people, when you ask them a question and they say no, most people go away. The volley method, it doesn't care. Think about a volleyball match. You have to hit the ball back and forth over the court. So the idea is when they serve you the ball, you have to get rid of it and get it right back to them. You can just simply rephrase the question. Let me give an example. They go, well, Mr. Seller, what do you need to get for that house? I don't know. You're the expert. Mr. Seller, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what price do you think you'd come back with it? What number do you think you need to get? Once the ball's served back, you shut your mouth and they have to respond back. Volleying keeps going until somebody drops the ball. Now, if you keep serving it back, studies show if you respond to somebody positively at least 2 times to any type of resistance questions, you'll most likely get more information for the decision process to move on. When people say no, they just shut down. So when they come back and they go, I don't know, Rick, honestly, I don't know. I'm all over the park. I go, listen, John, all you got to do is ballpark a number. I want to find the number that makes you and the missus move forward and makes you happy to find the place that you really want to be in life. What's that number? Now, by this time, you usually tick them off and they'll actually answer you in a forceful way. Now, don't be scared of this because the volley method just basically teased out an answer that most of the time, if you get a no and you walked away, you would have nothing to walk away with. You have to be willing to volley until they spit out a number. And you can practice this all day long. I know you don't know, but if you did know, what do you think that number would be? All I did was rephrase the question and spit it back. You could play this game. It's just a word with games. You just go back and forth. The idea is like, no. The ball's staying on your court until you give me a number. And the more you keep responding and do that, and the more it goes on, the more playful you have to be. I've had this going on 5, 6, 7 times. And once they understand you're not going to take a no answer, they'll eventually answer you. Or they'll kick you out. That is a risk too. But for the most part, they will answer you. The volley method works really well. Forewarn you, don't use this on your wife, girlfriend. It will blow up on you because they start to figure out what you do. Now, my last method for trial closings is one you got to master. It's the scrunchy face. That's right. And here's what you do. When you deliver bad news, a low offer on the go for no, which we teach you how to do it, just scrunch up your face. Mr. Seller, would you would you consider $75,000? Why do I do that? Number one, I want to transfer the stress on me. As much as you think it when you're doing a negotiation with 2 parties, it's stressful for both. Both don't know what the outcome is and it creates stress. So if I take that stress and I wear it on my face and I show facial, remember, almost 70% of communication is nonverbal. So they're looking at you and they start to go, God, he's making me uncomfortable. I've got to save him. It is completely a psychological play and it works really well. They will actually feel empathy for you and try to take your stress away by putting the stress on them. Don't ask me how, but I will tell you, it works. And it also seems like you're a human being because you feel uncomfortable in making an offer that low. And it's perfectly fine. But you can't, the idea is you can't be this transactional monster that does not invoke emotion or empathy when you make these offers. That's why all these methods work. Now, the closing scripts, guys, I just showed you four different techniques on how to master the closing scripts. Why? Because this is the part where you have to play around with the negotiation. This is where most of you fall way short. And you have to practice it. Just like I taught you before, whenever you respond to someone, you have to practice the objections. If you know there's going to be 6 objections, take it like a firing range and start figuring it out. My suggestion, one of the best training grounds you can go, just go on a Zillow Fizbo and just rip through and find out everyone's objection. Just have fun with it. That's the best way to do it. Now, the last but not least is your cash buyer script. And we're going to go through this quickly. Number 1, you got to find cash buyers that have the authority. If they don't have the authority to make a decision, don't be talking to them. You're wasting your time. Just ask. Number 2, I need a cash buyer that has speed. Why? Because some of the transactions I have to take down, I have to promise a faster closing delivery date, usually 30 days or less, but sometimes even 2 weeks. I want cash buyers that can make a decision and move fast. Don't have time for people that just need to kick it around 3 months. You need a realtor. You don't need me. My next line of questioning is going to be assignments. Do you work with assignments of contract? I shut my mouth. I want to hear what their organic response is to assignment of contracts. Is that a scam? I've never heard of that before. Is that legal? Any of those questions, I know, number 1, they're not my cash buyer and they need to go talk to my title company or spend more time with one of my team members to explain how this works. Whenever somebody tries to take down an assignment of contract the first time, it's usually a train wreck. They're scared. They don't understand it. And for that reason, I like to bring in a title company. And they usually have to miss out on 2 or 3 deals before they get why the assignment of contract is so lucrative for them to take over, because we can move it fast and it minimizes everyone's cost. Now, the next one we talk about is their ability, particularly their proof of funds. Now, this is where a lot of new wholesalers get hung up. You've got to understand, it's very hard to ask for someone proof of funds when you're not presenting them a deal. You've never done a deal. And honestly, it's a little obtrusive to ask someone who is a veteran cash buyer like me. I will not give you my proof of funds unless you show me some ability. Now, it's okay to say, listen, I'm a little bit newer to the business, or I'm an active wholesaler. I got some deals coming down the pipeline. I'm getting ready to get them inked. When I get those deals inked, can I show them to you? And at that point, would you show me a proof of funds? Absolutely. I think that's a fair trade-off. And I think a lot of you have to make that. Cash buyers are not stupid in today's market, and they're not going to sit there and just give you a proof of funds with no information. It's actually crazy if you think about it. Now, I'm also going to make sure they understand we do a simple walkthrough process to inspect our properties. We do not do formal inspections. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the time for it. It's a wholesaling deal. If they can't come out to the property, take a look at it on their own or with their partner or maybe with a contractor and get in and out in 10, 15 minutes, then they are not going to be a good cash buyer for your deal. That means they need professional inspections, they need longer inspection periods, and they got to pay more for those types of projects. That's just the bottom line. So we have to let them know you are working with a wholesaler and these are the requirements to work with a wholesaler. Listen, at the end of all cash buyers, I want one thing. You ready? I want them to be compliant. If they fight me, if they beat me up, they make my life difficult, I take them off my list right away. They're a waste of my time. And guys, the most important thing on a cash buyer list is if you go through this entire series of what I just asked you on the cash buyer script, you'll find out if they're a cash buyer. I don't want wholesalers on this list. It's a waste of time. It doesn't mean I can't JV with a wholesaler, but a wholesaler that pretends to be a cash buyer is just wasting your time because they're going to need a much deeper discount than you got it. And what's the point? Like, I'm not doing this business to give stuff away. So it's important you identify your cash buyers and you understand